Hello and welcome to another episode of Consensus with Canonizer. I am here with, as always, with the Canonizer Council. Brent Alsop, how are you?
Good.
Kelly Cassidy. And hidden
Doing good.
in darkness is our not an expert.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic.
All right. Well, I am hoping that this episode doesn't get quite as heated as last episode did, because we are all about building consensus. And so we're going to build consensus on a couple of topics here today. Kelly, do we want to start with your topic?
Sure. Mine might be the more controversial of the two, but hopefully we can find some middle ground.
Out as a palate cleanser, and then we can come back to the other one.
So let me go to mine. In the news a lot is what to do about illegal immigration and about what to do with undocumented immigrants or illegal aliens or whatever people would like to call them. Currently in America, there are estimates, depending on who you ask. Yale University estimates that up to 29 million illegal immigrants were in the U.S. in 2021. That was before the large surge that happened recently. The United States Census and the Migration Policy Institute both estimate about 13,700. The Department of Homeland Security, 11,700,000. And Congress, in their study, estimated 12,800,000. So the number is big. You know, it's as big as several Western states combined. And so what do we do? A few years ago, there was discussion about what was called DACA. I think that was proposed during the Obama administration. People who had been here a long time, children who knew no other place but America is their home, and should they be given special consideration? I think most people would have thought that was a good idea. Obama tried to do it by executive order, and it was overturned. The courts have a long history of who knows what they're doing with immigration. Some things they like, some things they don't like. For example, in part of their conflicting decisions, illegal aliens can be denied jobs, purchasing land, and they can be deported for joining groups or associating with groups that a American citizen would otherwise not have any problem with doing. But they've also ruled that immigrant children need to be provided access to public education. There's been some recent court orders also conflicting on, but these have been from lower courts about what powers the executive branch can do. And to set the stage, the executive branch basically, for all intents and purposes, has free reign in immigration. The Department of Homeland Security, no, it's under the Department of Justice. There are immigration courts that people can have hearings at, and then they can appeal that decision to an immigration court. And then that immigration court ruling can be overturned by the Attorney General on whatever whim he or her has that day. And then they can, after that, they can sometimes appeal it to a federal district court for an additional hearing. But that doesn't seem to be a universal right that they have. So anyway, there's some background. Let's talk.
That's highly educational. The only problem I have with your current topic as is, we've had this problem before, but much of the agreement camp seems very biased, and I don't feel like supporting the agreement camp. For example, the very name is call them illegal aliens. That seems kind of hateful.
Well, that's why I put something that everybody could agree with. They're called illegal aliens in federal law. Many in Congress
Right.
and social programs call them undocumented immigrants or non-citizens.
Yeah.
So
How about if we?
let's try to be inclusive.
Yeah, but what would happen if we just changed the name to? Or in other words, I'm just requesting that. In other words, if anyone sees what they consider to be biased information in the topic title or the topic agreement statement, they could request and propose changes to make it so that
Yeah.
it doesn't feel
I
biased.
can't
And
see
that's
anything. I can't see anything less biased than just including all of the common terms here. The agreement statement here seems very impartial and very objective.
yeah. I tried to make it as unbiased as it can possibly be, using 4 different sources for the
Right.
numbers,
Yeah.
different sources for as you look down at the source material here,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can
That's
see there's
very
a wide
educational.
variety of information this is drawn from.
Yeah, that's very educational, and I think I'm ready to accept most of the statement. But what about if we just change the name of the topic to be what should be done with non-citizens? Because telling them to call them illegal aliens to me sounds
Well,
hateful.
and I think that's wrong because there are people who are non-citizens who are in the country legally. For example, if
Oh,
you're
yeah,
here
that's
on a visa,
yeah,
you're a documented immigrant or still a non-citizen. So that's why
okay. So
some
yeah,
people still call them that.
so then how about so yeah, what could we call them that doesn't sound like calling them illegal aliens? To me, calling them illegal aliens just sounds hateful.
Well, I think the controversy here is that there are some who the term illegal alien itself is explosive enough that I think, and Brent may very well be in this camp, that there are people who feel like that's a term that should never be used.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's as explosive as, say, the N word.
Right.
Yeah, but again, that's how it's referred to in federal law. So
And
it's like
this is-
saying, like, and I don't think we're getting to the point of the issue by talking about that. I'd rather talk about what we should do with people. Like
Yeah, I agree.
I know that there are 2 camps in here currently. There's deport all illegals and increase legal immigration, or just do a blanket amnesty that, like Ronald Reagan did in 1986, to those in the Cuban boat crisis.
I'm just
Yeah.
just this is an example of a euphemistic treadmill. No matter what term is used, it's eventually going to become an insult in some way, or derogatory, or offensive.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I like having this in the title because even if you disagree with calling a person by that term, we do need to be in the same reality, in the sense that at the agreement level, there are people who will use that term.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So I'm looking at that. Deport illegals. Increase legal immigration.
So let me go to the consensus tree, and we'll have the 2 topics that are there now: deport illegals, increase legal immigration, or a blanket amnesty. Which one should we talk about first?
Well, which one have you joined?
I've joined the deport illegals, increase legal immigration.
Okay.
And I have some personal reasons for that. I know people personally who have been deported after coming to the country legally, because they did what they were doing what they were supposed to do, and then they violated the terms of their immigrant visa and had to return back to their home country, which is part of the immigration process. You have to say you abide by these things, and the government knew exactly who these people were and could keep track on what their requirements were. Also, while I worked for Congress, the biggest issue we had was having to do with immigration, specifically legal immigration, people wanting to get a spouse from a foreign country into the country, which, by the way, the Supreme Court said is not a right. So that's one of the conflicting views of the Supreme Court. Well, at the same time, it seems that if you come illegally, regardless of what country you're from, in over the last few years, you've been given preferential status to those, for example, in India, who to get a green card have to wait up to 30 years. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
and so we're opening the doors for people who don't abide by the system, and the people who are trying to abide by the system are totally left out in the cold. And I think the only way to make it fair is to deport people who are here illegally. Now, there's going to be humanitarian concerns, and those are addressed multiple ways. You can have humanitarian release. You can have you can plead your case for refugee status. There's a number of ways to do that. But in general, there's got to be a way to say, if you've come since this date, you are going back to your home country, and you can reapply the correct way if you would like, but you're not going to be able to stay here until then. The costs of illegal immigration are estimated to be a negative for the taxpayer, $62,000 some odd dollars per illegal per non-green card holding alien. I'll try to do that, say it that way to keep it more polite. So that means that for whether it's the 12,000 or the 29,000, the American taxpayer is on the hook for about $62,000 per person in housing, in food, in health care, and other public services. And by the way, these are services that are not given to American citizens who are in the lower classes. And so there's kind of just this whole new world of government programs that have been opened up that aren't available to American citizens who might be in a worse socioeconomic status. So that was my camp.
So I see this as two different camps, because I could certainly support everything that you're saying about legal immigration. All of the language about illegal immigration, I have problems with. I don't see these two. Obviously, we can build consensus around any number of things, but I do not see these two camps as totally encompassing the argument, because I think where you find the greatest amount of consensus with regard to immigration is on legal immigration. I think even in the Trump administration, you would find people that would probably agree with the components of your camp that champion more and more legal immigration and a smoother way to legal immigration. The president himself would do that. But I think that there really is broad consensus around the idea that legal immigration is a good thing and needs to be made easier and simpler. When you tie that to illegal immigration and the sort of draconian measures that the Trump administration is advocating, it's not necessarily taking them yet. I mean, we do have the instances of people being, particularly the one case that's egregious where the Supreme Court has said 9-0 that President Trump has to facilitate the return of someone who was wrongfully deported. And President Trump's refusal to do that, which I think is a constitutional crisis. But in terms of the broad application of immigration policy, the Trump administration right now has deported fewer people than the Biden administration deported during the same period of time.
Yeah, and much fewer in order of deportations. Obama was known as a deporter in chief, and the backlash he faced was almost non-existent for the 3 million non-citizens who are here without proper documentation to any other president. I think George Bush was a distant second. Trump is a distant third overall in his first administration, and then Biden.
Interesting.
At least that's the information that I was able to find.
Cool.
And so I agree that those two things, if we take them apart, that we could build consensus on that. But I also don't know that that's going to solve the problem, because I think they go hand in hand. We can't open legal immigration and allow illegal immigration at the same time.
Well, I think that's correct, but I think the approach, for instance, the rhetoric of the Trump administration has never matched the reality. We haven't built the wall. Mexico didn't pay for it.
And you can't.
We're no longer talking about building the wall and having Mexico pay for it. And so
Both
we
are just
sort of
absurd.
shifted away from rhetorical failure towards something else. And now the rhetoric is really heated, and there are, again, egregious examples of a presidential overreach. But in terms of the overall policy, we are not seeing any sort of coherent approach to deporting undocumented workers. And so I think that's where the controversy is. I mean, I could support a camp that has all the talk about legal immigration and even says what you've just said, Kelly, that we link an approach to illegal immigration to legal immigration, and we can't fix legal immigration until we fix, or we can't fix legal immigration in a vacuum. Fixing legal immigration requires us to deal with the challenges of illegal immigration. But I wouldn't be willing to go along with any of the policy prescriptions that are at least hinted at in this camp. I'm going to look at the camp here in more detail.
Yeah. How about we create a super camp, increase legal immigration, and put every camp as a sub camp of that, and then we can have a deport illegals, and we can have make it harder on the illegals. In other words, they shouldn't have. In other words, if you're in here illegal, you shouldn't be able to buy property, and you shouldn't have better services than a U.S. citizen. But
and that's a good point. And one of the things that I don't know if it's in the super camp or if it's just something that I know is the billions and billions of dollars that are currently being spent by cities. But eventually the federal government, everybody's going to pick up the money that's being spent in places like New York and Colorado for their illegal immigrants, because there's no way that their city funds are going to be able to cover the billions of dollars. I think New York has estimated they're going to have to spend $6 billion.
And that's up to the city. If the city can manage that, I think that's a good thing. That's what.
Except as they point out, it's not a city issue. It's a federal issue, because these people have come into the country, and do we let them be homeless and run wild on the streets, or do we provide some place for them to stay and hope that they can?
That's what we do with our
improve
citizens.
Their lives.
We let them run homeless wild on our streets,
and so currently we've got another 12 to 29 million of them.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those aren't homeless.
A lot of them are staying in luxury hotels, for example, in New York, because they didn't have the space for them in other homeless shelters.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is a lot of them are illegally employed by employers who are skirting taxes and paying them under the table.
And they are
absolutely. In a church situation I had a couple of people who they were actually here legally on student visas one of them had overstayed a visa and was supposed to be getting paid under the table, except her employer decided not to pay her
Wow.
and said, well, if you complain, I'll just tell ICE where you are.
Wow.
And so it's a bad situation all around for everybody involved. And another part of this is just the sheer number of things like children who came here unaccompanied, who excuse me, the country who the government has lost complete track of. A couple of nonprofits, they say we hope for the best. We're assuming that most of them are just clerical errors and people not checking in for court dates, but they also say there is a good number who we fear are being sex trafficked, and that's just part of what happens with illegal immigration. You bring the poor people here who don't have the ability to care for themselves, and then they get taken advantage of.
Yeah. But still, that's the other thing about Canonizer is it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a representation of what people think now. And as I went through and read that agreement statement that Kelly so brilliantly looked up and researched and everything, that still feels way too biased to me. My feeling is that if someone on the other side of the issue went in, I feel like if I spent a long time researching that, I could find some differing statistics and it's just hard for me to read that probably true stuff. But my head still isn't there yet, even though I may live in this non-real liberal.
And I would love to have any other statistics because I found every single number I could find.
Right. But I would still feel more comfortable to just have a better name and to move much of this stuff down into an agreement or a subcamp. It just, I don't know. It's not sure.
Well, we can do that now, or we can move on to our next topic and we'll fix
what about
this
just call it a
next
different
time.
name? What about a better name?
Well, again, I don't know a better name that we could do. If you can suggest something, let's try it. But I'm going by what maybe we start out with non-citizen and then end with illegal aliens, because that covers kind of the whole thing of what they're called by people on the left, on the right, and in the law.
What should we do about what should we do about people in the U.S. illegally? What happened?
Well, I think you can have a more encompassing topic and skirt this whole issue by making the topic about immigration. What should be done about immigration reform?
Oh, there you go.
So you make it very simple. So it's because as you drill down, even in that first topic.
How about that? How about we
focusing on legal immigration? When you focus on legal immigration and supporting camp, the agreement camp already hasn't even brought in legal immigration. It's just talked about what do we do with these illegal aliens.
Yeah, I like that.
In fact, if legal immigration is truly a component to this kind of reform, then I think that just calling it immigration reform removes the charge language, allows for a broader topic, and then allows for an agreement camp that Brenda suggested where everybody can agree that we need to fix broken legal immigration.
Yeah, so how about we pivot it to be, how could we improve immigration policy? Or what can be done to improve immigration policy or something like that?
All right, let's see.
Yeah, is Jim, is that Kelly doing that?
Yep.
Oh, can we improve it? Can we even let's make it a little more hopeful than that.
Can we
because that's kind of negative. What?
I'm just making fun of the typo.
What can we do? How can we improve immigration policy? I think
and I would like to point out that I believe the answer is probably no, because It has been worked on for my entire adult life with things only getting worse. When I worked for Congress, people were complaining about a year's wait for a immigration visa, and now again we're up to 30 years.
But to me, this is I think Canonizer could change this. If we could get this to go viral, and everyone had positive ideas, and we build consensus around the best ideas.
There you go. Let's improve immigration policy.
What to do about illegal immigration and immigrants in the U.S. That's the name of the current. Oh no, there it is. That's what's on your title page. I'm trying to just figure out how to change.
Yeah. And then put somewhere in the goal of the statement to say the goal is to build and track consensus around how to best improve immigration policy. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I'm going to go in and join.
Okay. All right. So I think we have a direction for that topic.
Cool.
Should we move on to the next one?
How come I'm not seeing it live? I'm not seeing that. You just changed you haven't changed the camp name yet. You just changed the heading on the statement.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm not going to join. What does that mean? Oh, you moused over don't mouse over that information thing, because you have to go back to canonizer.com. That messes things up. That's a known problem. It hasn't been fixed yet.
All right. Well, the next problem is Brent's.
Yeah.
It's thoughts on Human 2.0.
Yeah, have you guys heard of Meridian magazine, online magazine at all?
I used to read it a long time ago when it was a printed magazine.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't know it was still, decades ago.
At one time, I didn't know it was ever a printed magazine. But anyway, they came up with this Human 2.0. Yeah, go to that article there. Not that one. That's the magazine itself. Or you can get to it from there. But no, not that. No, not that one. That one. That's the article, and it's basically it's the stereotypical fundamentalist Christian view of transhumanists.
This is in Meridian magazine right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull up Meridian magazine. I'm not finding it.
Yeah, go to Thoughts on Humanity 2.0, and it has links to all of it in the agreement statement.
Oh, okay, it's in the topic.
Yeah, the agreement statement links to everything there. But yeah, it's got all these stereotypical things about how evil it is, and scroll down a little bit more and show those 4 things they talk about that they focus on there. Gender. So in other words, they're saying that in the 4.1, the diminishing value of human life and human relationships. So they view us as being true transhuman as decreasing the value of human life and human relation, and I describe how that's all completely false, and especially the Mormon transhumanists are trying to make, because it is true, there are a lot of atheists, what would you call them, amoral, not immoral, but just amoral people that just.
Brent, I don't know if your microphone is moving, but you're fading in and out a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me move thanks for telling me. Is that better?
That is a little better.
Yeah, when I turn away from the microphone, that probably the directional mic, I think. So yeah, thanks for that update. But yeah, and so gender ideology, they think just because we look forward to being able to fix and I point out in our statement that at least my belief that there are both I believe in spirits that are knowledge of our spirits, and there are physical bodies, and there can be female spirits in male bodies and vice versa. And and I believe that eventually we'll be able to hack those and fix those and change those, and those people that can't see the future get totally freaked out by that kind of stuff. But anyway, and then go back to go back to Canonizer. Yeah, and open up the consensus tree and go to the progress is a good thing camp. Oh, slow down. Oh, there's a slow down camp in there now.
Yeah, I put that in there too.
Okay, cool. But yeah, if you scroll down there, I kind of have some quick stuff. And there's also a link that Lincoln Cannon has another good article. And eventually I want to put, or I want to talk to Lincoln Cannon and have him put, or on his side, I want to link to this video, this YouTube video, and a link to this topic where people can go in and support the issue and stuff like that. But anyway.
Nice. And let me show you my view.
Slow down, yeah.
And it's nothing I don't think that is bad. It's like I believe in fundamentally improving the human condition by science and technology. And then I added charity, which is something that wasn't in the Meridian article. But I'm not ready to take the full leap yet that, we should be changing gendered ideologies at a whim and that kind of thing. But certainly, I would love, I've got friends, I have 3 friends who have passed away from ALS that I would have loved to find some way for them to move again or even breathe on their own again or to use any sort of technology because it was beyond their grasp as they in their final months where they were unable to do anything. I've got a friend who is blind. He had cancer as a very young child and had his optic nerves removed. I'd love to find some technology that would allow him to experience the joys of sight. But I not just on a whim. I'm not ready to turn medicine over to people saying, hey, come on over and I'll pull your eyes out and I'll put a new one in.
Yeah. And when I say let ethics, speaking of let ethics catch up, Canonizer, and my view of Canonizer is that's because right now ethics is backtracking. It's polarizing. It's getting worse and worse. And people are becoming more and more fearful of even talking about it. Everyone, when you sit around the family table, everyone's afraid to talk about any of that stuff. And so we're like going back to cavemen because we can't even talk about it. And to me, that's the goal of Canonizer is to make it easier for people to talk about and say, well, and teach people how to talk about that stuff. Because to me, that's my life purpose is to build and track consensus around moral issues so ethics can keep up with technology. Otherwise, I think we're screwed. But anyway, that's my thought.
Well,
and I agree with that.
As I look through the, first of all, it's not actually a Meridian magazine article. They are just hosting it. It's a United Families International article.
Oh, interesting.
So this was not written by the people at Meridian Magazine.
Right.
So it's not really a Latter-day Saint perspective. It looks like it's more of just sort of a broader.
But that's Meridian there, right?
No, you're right. Yeah. No, it's being hosted at the Meridian website.
Oh.
But United Families International, I think, is a different.
Oh, is that a
I think that's a generic sort of evangelical.
That's a non-Mormon families thing out of Southern Colorado or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think very much that Meridian Magazine, or at least the editorial board of Meridian Magazine, agrees with United Families on this. But the thing that I find frustrating about it, I mean, I don't think I have any real problem with what Kelly has said and letting science and ethics catch up. The thing where I have a problem with the whole approach that evangelical Christianity, and to some degree the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the approach they take to transhumanism is that they conflate it with transgenderism.
Yeah.
And they use it sort of as a rhetorical club to beat up on transgender supporters. And there is so much more to transhumanism that is in perfect harmony with Latter-day Saint teachings. Brent, I remember very vividly going with you to the Mormon transhumanist conference a couple of years back. And, the people that spoke there, we had political candidates that came and spoke to us. We had a number of people in and out of the church. And the topics were I don't remember hearing one word about transgenderism. The whole idea was that technology and science are complementary with religious principles. And that
hopes.
So I see this as, to some degree, I mean, Brent, I would probably agree more with your camp in that I see this as an attack on transgenderism. And transgenderism, to a large degree, has, as far as I can tell, has nothing to do with transhumanism. I mean, they're trying to say, okay, since you believe that there can be sort of a scientific repository for spirits, if you will. Kelly, you're talking about somebody with ALS. Transhumanists would say, okay, if you've got ALS, if there's some way to transfer your consciousness from a body that's failing into an android body or into a cloned body or into some kind of body created by science, then that's a righteous and appropriate thing to do. And I really don't think that Latter-day Saints, I mean, I guess many would object to that, but I don't see how doctrinally there is any reason to object to that sort of thing, because we recognize as Latter-day Saints the idea that there is a consciousness that functions independently of the mortal body, that preceded the mortal body, and that will succeed, that will endure beyond mortality, that our consciousness will continue. Now, Brent, I know that isn't something you believe, because you don't believe.
Well, depends on how you define those terms.
Okay.
Because I believe in a what do they call it? A self-existent identity or soul, or.
But you
anyway,
believe that it's essentially a scientific construct that we would have to revive scientifically, but you don't believe that people who have died
have subjective consciousness after they're dead. Right.
I mean, you believe that consciousness it's possible to revive it.
Yeah.
Using science.
Yeah.
But that consciousness is not functioning for people who are not alive.
Right.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah, there's nothing sentient that arises after you die, basically. But there is something that survives after you die, and there is something that pre-existed. That's our knowledge and our possibility that we exist and all that kind of stuff. And that ties in very tightly or neatly with Mormon doctrine, as long as you clearly define all those terms and stuff like that. So.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons why when you describe yourself as a Mormon transhumanist atheist, that those terms are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Whereas I think a lot of Latter-day Saints would hear those terms and think they were. But I think you have found a way to shape an ideology or an understanding of the universe that incorporates elements of all three of those words in ways that might make people who identify as Mormons or as transhumanists or as atheists somewhat uncomfortable. But I mean, just going to this article, the idea that, I mean, because it says right at the beginning, there are four mechanisms pushing this extreme movement or being pushed by this movement. They are as follows. Number one, gender ideology. And so this article seems to be afraid that if you push the idea that consciousness can be transferred from one body to another, you are enabling someone who says that they are a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body. You're enabling them to actually create a body that matches their gender identity as they interpret it themselves.
Right.
And to me, that is so far down the list
Yeah.
of what would be accomplished if we were to figure out ways to transfer consciousness into functioning vessels.
Artificial vessels. Yeah.
I mean, you know, to be able to transfer. You know, my father passed away. It's just been over 9 years. On May 4th, it was 9 years to the day that my father passed away. If there had been some way to transfer his consciousness out of his cancer-riddled, stroke-addled body into anything that would allow me to continue to interact with him and to recognize him as an existent being, that his consciousness was available for me to be able to interact with him, I can't think of anything I wouldn't have given to make that happen.
Woohoo, yeah.
So the idea that we should not be pursuing that because we're afraid that transgender people might have easier access to fulfill their ideology, this strikes me as ridiculously short-sighted. Kelly, would you agree with that, or do you see this as a
No, I agree with that, and like as we've been talking, I agree with most everything we said. I thought we were debating the article's premise, and the entire premise of let's go hog wild, or I guess that's what he was arguing against, is where I'm coming from. That we want to have technology, we want to have improvement. I'd love to chat with my mom and dad again, but I don't want to risk my children's future on mad science until we have figured out really what works and what doesn't, and not what we hope to work.
Yeah, good one.
Well, it's interesting because I read earlier today an article about the television series Picard. I don't know if you guys are Star Trek fans, but Picard is a revival essentially of Star Trek: The Next Generation. There are 3 seasons that are streaming on Paramount Plus, and the first 2 aren't very good, and the third one is amazing because because the first 2 just focused on the character of Captain Picard, and the third one incorporated the entire cast and all the characters from Star Trek: The Next Generation and was a true sort of reunion. But in the second season, Captain Picard is diagnosed with an incurable illness. I can't even remember what it was, but it's like it was incurable. And they do what the article was making fun of the plot device, because what they essentially did was build him an android body and transfer his consciousness from one body to the other. And the argument was, well, the new body really isn't Captain Picard because it's a duplicate of Captain Picard. And I've always wrestled with this in the Star Trek universe, like when you beam Captain Kirk down from the Enterprise to a planet and you rebuild him on the planet, I've always said you're killing this Captain Kirk, and then you're creating a duplicate that thinks it's Captain Kirk because it has all the memories, but there's no continuity of consciousness between those two. And there's a lot of fierce debate over whether that's real or how that works. So I think that's tangential to this article. But this kind of thinking is pervasive in fiction as well as in science. And science is getting to the point where we can create intelligence. You know, what happens when we create an artificial intelligence that, whether or not it's conscious in any way that we define consciousness, it has all of the earmarks. It seems conscious, right? I mean, when I interact with ChatGPT now, I sometimes go, this seems like I'm talking to somebody. I feel like I don't want to hurt its feelings. I feel like I have a friend when it says nice things to me, but I also realize there's nothing behind the eyes. There's nothing there. This is, but
it's not like anything.
If it becomes, you attach that to a robot and you interact with it and it's talking to you and it remembers you and it's simulating emotion, it's simulating kindness,
Simulating qualia, no real qualia.
simulating qualia to the point where I can't distinguish the difference, then does the difference really matter? You know, I mean, these are, so I think, I guess I'm trying to straddle the line between your camp and Kelly's camp, because I think there are a lot of ethical questions to ask.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be able to figure out a way to let science catch up with it.
Yeah, but and one of my goals with Canonizer has always been to, I think it would be so great to know what every Mormon thought on this particular issue, because I know there's a lot of people that would really buy into this camp, and I'm sure a lot of their readers are reading it in a positive, supportive of what they're saying way. But it'd be so cool if we could get all of that to canonize their thoughts about it and educate everyone about how distorted that kind of view is. But anyway, but I don't know a way to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a way of how do we get Canonizer to get traction.
Yeah.
But it's just so short-sighted to have this all derail, because once you start bringing in transgenderism, that is the perfect way to alienate the entire Latter-day Saint audience.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Meridian Magazine's doing here, because they're speaking to true believing Latter-day Saints. And the minute you invoke transgenderism, all of a sudden it's, oh, well, that's bad.
Yeah.
And anything good about this just gets shoved to the wayside, because they see this as a Trojan horse to make transgenderism more acceptable.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
All right, well, I'm going to create a camp that straddles the line between both of those.
Cool.
So, all right, anybody else want to weigh in here? Not an expert. You've been quiet. And he's going to continue to be quiet. All right. So with that, I think we've come to the end. Does anybody else have any parting thoughts as we conclude our live stream here?
Been a nice, short, and sweet one.
All right. Well, thanks.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks, everybody. This one didn't get too heated, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, see, I can do this without beating everybody up. All right. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week on Consensus with Canonizer.
Yeah, thanks.